We appear to be graced with the rules for another Eldar avatar. Let's take a look at the rules for the Yncarne's Incarnation of Death. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking more Eldar leaks, and I believe that this is the first one that we've seen for the Yncarne. They were rumoured to be within the same codex as the rest of the Eldar, and this really does seem like confirmation of that. With this latest set of leaked datasheets from the Playtester Codex, they do have similar datasheets in very similar styles, and to be honest I can perfectly see why Games Workshop would want to include them into the same codex. At present they're an army that consists of exactly 3 characters and their own set of special rules for other miniatures. The Yncarne is essentially the Yncarne's avatar, this incarnation of Ynys, the god of the dead. Really quite a spectacular model with that big swirling soul vortex, and currently I'd say it's one of the more interesting things that you can do with Yncarne. At least in 8th and 9th edition, this eldritch monstrosity teleports around the board, basically appearing whenever squads die, and it makes it a really interesting model to use, bringing a whole load of melee threat and psychic powers to exactly where your opponent doesn't need them. Again, much like the Wraith Knight and the Strands of Fate, we appear to have some leaked datasheets from the Playtester Codex. It's not impossible that some small revisions might be made to this, but it seems like the vast majority of these changes are how it's going to appear in the new Eldar Codex. So anyway, on to the new details. The Yncarne does appear to remain an HQ choice for the Yncarne, and on the new datasheet it's listed at 13 power level, a little bit lower than it is before at 15. Certainly looks like an interesting case, a model getting a massive power boost and also a points cut at the same time. Usually one power level tends to translate to around about 20 points, so we can guess that this one's going to be around about 260 points, though it could be anywhere within a small range. Keywords wise, it is looking very similar to how it was before. It's a monster character with the fly keyword, counts as a demon, has the Psyker keyword. I think the only major change is that it appears to have gained the Azayani keyword to allow it to better work with the craft worlds. I think that keyword will allow it to be taken with the Strands of Fate mechanic, which requires the entire force to be one craft world. I feel like in the new codex we might just see that Yncarne basically becomes a kind of new craft world, and they more sort of play it that way for simplicity, probably allowing them to use some other Drukhari units within their detachments. The statline's seen a major shake-up. Some things look stronger, but there are some downsides too. It's gone up to movement 12 from movement 8, so it's certainly going to be jumping around the battlefield far faster. It's got a weapon skill and ballistic skill of 2+ as before, strength and toughness 7, both of those increased by 1 pip from strength 6. That's certainly going to make it a lot tougher to take down for mid-strength weaponry. It's gone up to 12 wounds, that's an increase from 9. Certainly means that the model is going to be individually tougher, but it does actually bring with it a few downsides. Before it was a character model that you couldn't target unless it was the closest model, but now if it is exposed on the battlefield, enemy heavy weapons just are going to be able to focus this down if they really want to. Like the avatar of Cain, it does seem very hard to take down, but it's definitely a weakness being able to be shot directly when otherwise it could have been screened. Otherwise, it's got 6 attacks as before, leadership 10 and a 3+ save, and it basically seems to have the exact same special rules for reducing damage as the avatar of Cain, gaining a 4+ invul and halving incoming damage. It's a decent upgrade compared with what it was before. Previously I believe that the Yncarne just had a 6+ feel no pain, so in general halving incoming damage is going to be far tougher than that. It's perhaps a bit of a shift for a bit more of a finesse piece that you have to hide at all times, to more of a frontline damage dealer bruiser that's going to hit far harder, be far tougher, but also be able to engage by the foe directly. The other downside of having 12 wounds though is that it does appear to have a degrading profile. The things that degrade are its move, strength and attacks, meaning that as it gets weaker it's going to be a bit more of a psychic and ranged piece rather than a melee one, though even at its lowest ebb it's still going to be very dangerous. Even on lowest profile it's still going to be hitting overall at strength 9 with AP -4 and 4 attacks, so it's hardly just a threat that you're going to be able to ignore. Moving on, let's talk about its weapons and special rules. Before the shooting and the combat phase though, you do get Psychic. It is unchanged from before. You get to cast 2 powers from the Yncarne Revenant discipline. We don't know how good they are yet, obviously things could have got massively better or worse for all we know. The Yncarne does appear to have a new shooting attack though, called Swirling Void Energy. This is basically a 6-inch range flamer attack, assault d6, and hitting at strength 7 AP -2 damage 1. Perhaps the most interesting thing about that though is that in its special rules it has a Swirling Energies special rule, which allows it to hit every single model within range for that attack. So if you do manage to jump the Yncarne into the midst of the enemy army, you could potentially tear out quite a lot of souls. Theoretically that could be a really massive damage increase, but in reality with only damage 1 I think it's going to be a bit underwhelming against quite a lot of targets, and if you're getting that close to 6 inches anyway, there's a good chance you're just going to be charging and killing whatever you need to, never mind harvesting a few souls with some flames. Still though, it's really nice to have, and it's going to be very satisfying whenever you manage to jump the Yncarne into the midst of an enemy formation. Really though, the main event is the Sword of Souls, which gets 2 attack choices now, as so many things do within 40k. And also, in a Games Workshop trend, it does appear to be ignoring Invulns on its big profile, strength +4, AP -4, and damage D3 +3. Basically, the Yncarne's going to be hitting very similarly to Be'lakor. Games Workshop does seem to be getting a bit happier to hand out the ignores Invulns thing to quite a lot of their strongest things in the game. To be honest, I don't really mind it too much on the most powerful damage dealers of each faction. It kind of feels at least reasonably appropriate here, as it does with the Necron Nightbringer. Though I must admit, at least compared with the Yncarne, the Nightbringer does seem to be a sort of similar kind of threat, but just costs a whole load of points more. In any case, with that kind of damage reliability, you're very likely to be killing any one single character in a single round of combat, and putting massive damage on any of the heavy units that you encounter. It means that the Yncarne really is a threat that the opponent does not want near their heaviest hitters, and at what seems to be a relatively cheap points cost, it seems to be a great unit that you might be able to trade up against other enemies. Otherwise, if it is going to fight a whole load of hordes, you can attack with a sweep profile as well. That's only strength user, so anywhere between strength 7 and strength 5, AP -4, damage 1, double attacks, and that one does not ignore invul saves. Still though, should be good for killing something like 8 guardsmen per turn. Finally, we get into the Yncarne special rules. It does appear to get both battle focus and strands of fate. We've already talked about strands of fate in a video much earlier today, and it seems like just the sort of model that you'd like to punch in a couple of 6s sometimes. Perhaps particularly if you need to make sure that you make a charge with the Yncarne and punch in a 6. I guess the odd automatic saving throw against a really high damage weapon might well help too. Battle focus, we still don't know exactly what it is yet. It's rumoured to be a movement after shooting, though it might well preclude you from charging for all we know. Otherwise, it's prevented from taking any warlord traits. It has a small explosion rule for rolling a 6 for 1 mortal wound within 3 inches. Still gives a morale boost for a 12-inch range, ignores combat attrition modifiers. A slight downgrade on the previous of just ignores morale. Games Workshop does seem to be trying to rein in that mechanic somewhat. And it still has its jumping around the board trick in inevitable death. Basically, when a unit loses its last model, you can jump to within 1 inches of that last model, provided you're not in it with engagement range of enemy troops, and if you do so, you can't heroically intervene or charge in the same turn. It does say turn, not battle round, so provided there was enough space for it, say if your opponent charged one of your units and killed it, you might be able to set up the Yncarne for a massive counter charge the next turn. There really are quite a lot of gamey uses with that ability, definitely a fun one to have on the table, and perhaps one of the reasons that it seems to be a relatively well played model within the craft worlds, even if the stats are far less overwhelming at the moment. Overall, I must admit that the Yncarne looks like a monstrously powerful Eldar unit. It's hard to see how you can go too far wrong with 260 points like that. It's going to be pretty tough to take down and take some focused fire. It'll get where it needs to pretty quickly with the option to jump around the board. 2 psychic powers coming out of it each turn are very nice, and when it does get close it's going to just be a massive threat to anything it can get its hands on, hopefully tearing up a bunch of infantry with that void energy before having a massive combat phase that can basically assassinate characters. Still though, it will be worth seeing whether or not it actually makes Yncarne more viable than the other craft worlds. If you want Strands of Fate, it looks like you'd have to go pure Yncarne and not just drop this into a craft world's army, so we'll have to see whether it's worth giving up the other things that you might be passing up for that, such as the new avatar of Cain. In any case, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Are we going to be bowing down to our new Eldar overlords, or are we going to dismiss this as yet another thing that's just going to die to Tau railguns with their points cost and army context that we haven't seen? If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular videos coming, including any other Eldar details I find, and a full review of their codex once it comes out. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.